Welcome back, everyone. It's been way too long since we've seen our next group. Please join me in welcoming Karen Chu. Karen, you are the Executive Director of the Northwest Sinfonietta. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us, Chris. It's wonderful to be here.
And also with us today is Maestro Yaniv Attar. Welcome, Maestro.
So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Karen, for those who are new to the area, share with us, what is the Northwest Sinfonietta?
Northwest Sinfonietta is a chamber orchestra. So we are an orchestra, as you would expect to see strings, violins, cellos, and wind instruments, a few brass instruments and percussion. But the chamber means that we could be performing in a room. So we're a small orchestra that can fit in a concert hall, as we play in Rialto, but we can also play in smaller spaces and with smaller groupings. So it makes for a very intimate concert experience.
Wonderful. Now, many people know the term symphony, but a lot of people don't know the meaning of sinfonietta. Can you define what that is for the non-musicians out there?
Sure. Sinfonietta simply means small symphony. So just like I was saying, we're smaller than a large symphony orchestra that has all of the lower brass and 100 people. We have about 33 at our largest.
Now, in addition to being the executive director of the Sinfonietta, you are also a musician who plays violin. What inspired you to become a part of the Sinfonietta?
So back in 2012, I was living on Vashon Island and working and playing more on the Seattle side of things. But I had a friend on Vashon, Terry Cole, who is actually our second clarinetist in Northwest Sinfonietta. And so I heard about the group from her and took a look at the website, and the next time there was an opening in the violin section, decided to audition and won my spot and started playing with the group, and I just fell in love with the group. Since it's smaller, it is kind of like a family. We perform in different locations. We do perform in the Rialto Theater in Tacoma, but we also perform in Puyallup, and we do runouts around the area. And so I kind of fell in love with the idea of playing concerts in different places, and fell in love with the audiences, and just really enjoy playing with the group. And then let's see, in 2019, the executive director position became open, and I also had some history in arts administration, some background in arts administration, and so I started this job in addition to playing in the summer of 2019. So I haven't had a regular season as executive director of the group since COVID started, but you work with what you've got, and we've been able to really stay focused and keep going and do a lot of great video presentations, and now we're back to live performance, and we couldn't be happier.
That is wonderful. Live performances are back, and it's such a great thing to have that happening. Maestro Yaniv, the Sinfonietta is unique in that it is one of the few orchestras in the world that's moved to an artistic partner model of operations. Can you explain what that means to us?
Yeah, so most orchestras have a music director that, have their own ideas of programming and artistic vision and all this. But a few years ago, I actually came to it in the middle of that. They're already in the model of artistic partners. Basically, instead of having one conductor that conducts the entire season and bring his or hers vision for the orchestra, Sinfonietta brought at the beginning 3 different conductors, 3 artistic partners. Now we have 2 artistic partners. And the idea is that those conductors rotate. So some of them stayed for another term, and then they bring more conductors. In French, conductor is chef d'orchestre. So you might think like, oh, yeah, are there too many chefs in the kitchen? But in that sense, I think what Sinfonietta is doing is so great because, I mean, the group is really phenomenal. group of musicians. And by having different conductors, which are rotating, it's so nice to have different point of views of programming, of interpretations. The idea is always coming from different sources, and it keeps it really fresh for both the orchestra and for the audience. And I think it's really interesting because there's always new blood, if you wish. And what I think is the best thing about the artistic partner model is that because there are, a number of chefs, basically you have to have someone or a group of people who are going to be shifting and navigating through the different visions of conductors and connected to their orchestra own path that they are dictating or they want it to happen. And because of it, the orchestra is very involved in that process. And I think when there is an involvement in that process, then the musicians really take ownership of what's happening in the orchestra, as opposed to, another orchestra that players come, they play, collect their pay, and move on. So I think that's a really unique situation, and it makes the music making really special.
Now, in addition to being a wonderful maestro, you are also an accomplished classical guitarist. What drew you to orchestral conducting?
You should have used the past tense. That was my instrument. I was a lot more accomplished than I used to. When I started focused on conducting, I actually stopped playing for quite a few years, maybe at least 10. And then the pandemic started. And somebody took my instruments from me. I had no orchestras to conduct and no way to make sound. So I picked up the guitar again. And actually then Karen asked me if I would play in their Baroque program, which happened just a week ago or so. And through the pandemic, I played a lot and I realized how much I missed it. But it's a contradiction for me, because I think the guitar is the most intimate instrument that exists. And the orchestra is the most powerful instrument that exists. So sometimes I joke that I conduct the orchestra like I play the guitar, and I play the guitar like I conduct the orchestra. So it's these two sides that I have. But what really drew me to conducting was the repertoire. I just fell in love with it at a very young age, and since I don't play an orchestral instrument, part of me to be part of this repertoire and music making was conducting.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. While we're sharing, tell us a little bit more about your background. I mean, you said you were young when you started into everything. What was your course of study? What did you do? Tell us about you. Let us get to know you a little bit better.
I was born in Israel, and I grew up there until I was 18. My mom bought me a guitar because she thought I'll, play a few chords by the fire pit, something like that. But then my teacher, when he was tuning the guitar for the first lesson, he was playing some Bach, which perked my ears, and I said, I have to learn that. I don't care about anything else. This is what I want to play. So this was my first exposure to classical music. And then my sister was studying film in Tel Aviv, and she had to analyze the soundtrack of Clockwork Orange. Not a very appropriate movie for a young, teenager or something, but a lot of the soundtrack is of Beethoven orchestral works, especially the scherzo of the Ninth Symphony. And immediately I became obsessed with orchestral music and started to listen more and more. And then my studies brought me to Jerusalem, and then I moved to London. I was at the Royal College of Music, then Juilliard in New York, and then McGill in Montreal, where I got my doctorate in conducting. And then I moved to Alabama. I was assistant conductor there, and then got the job here in Bellingham. So I'm the music director of the Bellingham Symphony. I also have an orchestra in Pennsylvania. It's a chamber orchestra, very much like Sinfonietta. And I'm so happy to work with Sinfonietta as one of the artistic partners.
You are an extremely busy maestro. We are so lucky to have you here.
Better than the alternative.
Now, Karen, when I think of the Sinfonietta, I think of your performances here in the Puget Sound area, hence the Northwest Sinfonietta. But you also have strong connections to Cuba as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we have this interesting part of our history. So some of your viewers may know, and some may not, that Tacoma has many sister cities. And the sister city in Cuba is Cienfuegos. And it turns out that they have a chamber orchestra very much like Northwest Sinfonietta. And so it was an idea of our executive director at the time, and Neil Birnbaum, and Christophe Chagnard, our music director of the time, to work with the Sister City Committee to see if we could really make a meaningful connection with that city through music. And so they began working with that chamber orchestra, ended up going for the first time on a tour of Cuba in January of 2012. And then that orchestra sent performers here in the fall of 2012, and we had a big community-wide extravaganza. We played Beethoven 9 with those performers, and the Sister City Committee was involved. I want to say that Jim Shea was instrumental in making all of this, cutting through the bureaucratic red tape and making that possible. And then Northwest Sinfonietta took a second trip to Cuba in January of 2013. So that was just when I was starting. I actually got to play on that concert when we had the musicians from Cuba here in October of 2012. It was an extraordinary opportunity. So there's just a lot of joy in music making. In Cuba, it's an event in a different way than it is here. That music is happening all the time, and all music, all good music is worth listening to, and so there's just a lot of joy around it, and we learned a lot from that connection, and I hope are still hanging on to that joy. We also have still kept connections with a lot of the artists in Cuba. And so we have one of our favorites coming this spring, the wonderful pianist and composer Aldo Lopez Gavilan is coming. We're going to present him in concert with one of our string quartets on April 29th at Schneebeck and May 1st in Puyallup. So we're super excited to have him come this spring.
That is wonderful to hear, and what an experience to have. Where do your musicians come from, Karen?
From all over the Pacific Northwest. We have a lot of our players come from Seattle, Olympia. A lot of them are in Tacoma and teach students and have lives in Tacoma. Our concertmaster, Denise Dillenbeck, comes over the mountain every time from Ellensburg. Of course, Yaniv comes down from Bellingham. So it really is a Puget Sound Northwest group.
That's wonderful. And I believe you said the number earlier, but how many members do you have currently? 33 regular members at our largest. So that's kind of a Beethoven-sized orchestra, Beethoven Symphony-sized orchestra. But like I said, we can scale up and down depending on what repertoire gets programmed and where we're going to perform. So there's a lot of variety with our group. Now, you mentioned the concert where you're having the composer come. What is your next concert, and where can we see it?
Yes, so all right, thanks for asking, because it's coming right up at the end of January. We have our next concert January 29th at Rialto Theater, and January 30th at the Pioneer Park Pavilion in Puyallup. We're having a guest conductor who's actually an artistic partner candidate, Jeffrey Myers, coming to conduct this wonderful program. It's bookended by Beethoven pieces, so we're starting with Beethoven Coriolan Overture and ending with the wonderful Beethoven 8th Symphony. And then in the middle, we have two works by wonderful female composers, living composers, Source Code by Jessie Montgomery, and Sound and Fury, which is the title of our whole concert, Sound and Fury by Anna Klein. So it is going to be a phenomenal concert. I encourage everyone who can to come on out. Tickets are available, and you can ask me about it at the office at office at nwsinfonietta.org. I'd love to give you more information about it.
Right. Is that where we would go to get tickets, or is there a website we can go to purchase tickets?
Website would be best, and that is nwsinfonietta.org.
Wonderful. Karen and Yaniv, it's been way too long since we've had you on the show, and I promise it won't be so long until next time. But I want to thank you both for joining us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Now we ask that you stick around because the Hilltop Action Coalition is up next. We'll be right back after this quick break.